Enlightenment Program, championed, of course, as part of our same charter, new charter mantra of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria. Today, we shall be interrogating issues surrounding the survival of a female corporate leader in a male-dominated board. Oh yeah, you heard that right. Survival as a female corporate leader in a male-dominated board. We're looking at this because we found that gender diversity on corporate boards is now being a growing necessity for companies to thrive and grow in today's environment. We know as an empirical fact that women account for about 70% of the global consumption demand, and they contribute about 28 trillion, 28 trillion in annual consumer spending. And therefore, for companies to thrive and grow, corporate boardrooms need to reflect the diversity of its customer base. To help throw insights into this subject is Mrs. Patricia Omolara Fagbure FCA, ICSA, and she is the samurai at Omolara Fagbure and Associates Unlimited. Mrs. Fagbure is a specialist in business advisory services, comprising corporate governance and corporate secretarial practices. She is a freelance contributor in Nigerian newspaper on this and other subjects. She is a non-executive director of AFN Brokers Limited. We shall unveil more on our guest shortly. And we mount her on a question and answer session very shortly. Also, in this segment of the program, we are going to be telling you a little bit of tidbits on ICAN, our membership, what we are about, and naturally, for you wishing to make adverts on this iconic program, where we tell you that your goods and services will reach the nooks and crannies of our globe. Please take note of how you can contact us so that we can serve you better. So please stay connected. We shall be back with you shortly.
You are welcome to ICAN on Air. This is Patricia Omolara Fagbure.
Good evening,
Well,
Mr. Fatunke. Thank you for having me. And please be assured that I do not take this for granted at all.
thank you very much. I will don't take you also for granted. I will want to also just do a schematic highlight of this subject of surviving as a female corporate leader in a male-dominated board, and to put it in schematic highlight form to help us frame how we are going to be looking at it. Uh, I like to ask you that the CAMA, that's the Companies and Allied Matters Act 2020, provides that all public liability companies must be have a board of directors. That is right. The Nigerian Code of Corporate Governance further reinforced the need for companies to have a well-composed board of directors. And so I want to frame it this way. In your view, what is a board of corporate entity and how critical is its composition to the success of failure of a corporate entity? One. And secondly, what should be the composition of an ideal board and the qualities of such board members?
Let me first of all say that the requirement for a board of directors is not just for public companies, it's for all companies.
Hmm.
We have to understand the background to company formation. A company is formed by a number of subscribers coming together to put down the funds to start a business. Now, the company, even though it's supposed to be a separate legal entity, is inanimate. It can sue and be sued, but it needs human beings to operate its affairs. The board is therefore seen as the engine room of a company. The subscribers would not, to the memorandum and articles of association would normally be the first directors or would appoint the first directors. And so the genesis is that there's no business that is a limited liability company that can exist without a board, which would carry out, the controls, the decisions, and the policy, and establish the policies by which the company will operate. Now, what we have is that that board usually has what I would call a two-part composition. The management, which is then appointed by the board itself. They recruit the managers who carry out the decisions and instructions of and implement the policies that have been put in place. So we have the managers who together form the management, and normally they are led by the CEO, which he may be a member of the board and he may not be. At the startup level, you might have a CEO who is a general manager position, but normally he would still come into the boardroom to make presentations and give suggestions and ideas, and generally report on the operations of the business. But in a bigger board, as time goes by, he becomes designated as the managing director, and he
Hmm.
can have one or two other directors assisting him, whom we will call executive directors in different units or different departments.
Hmm.
The thinking now is that a board should comprise more of the non-executives. So
Hmm.
that's the other side of the board. We have the non-executive directors. It is in this group that you also have the independent directors, who are supposed to be persons of eminence who want to lend their support and their ideas and their wisdom to the running of the business. So we
Hmm.
have two parts of the board, the management and the non-executive directors. Collectively, they come together to form the directing mind and will of
Hmm.
the company. So
Hmm.
definitely, there's no way a company will function very, very well without these parties that would represent the shareholders would have handed authority to the directors, who collectively form the board. And the board
Hmm.
will appoint the management to implement the policies, the decisions, and the controls that must, be established, and have the oversight functions. The management will also contribute to the initiatives and to the drive to make the company sustainable and profitable. So together they sit on a table to form the board.
Hmm.
And you can now see that there's no way that the company will function because it is inanimate. So it needs those parties to be able to function.
Excellent. Excellent, excellent. Putting it so schematically the way you have, and that drives us into the real intestine of the questions we are going to be interrogating today. And based on your corporate knowledge and versatility, do kindly run us, our viewers, uh, through the selection, some people call it recruitment criteria into the board of a typical corporate entity.
What you want to do, there are four basic things to look at in the selection of directors. The very first thing is reputation.
Hmm,
There is a saying by the late Reverend Billy Graham that when wealth is lost, nothing is lost.
hmm,
When health is lost, something is lost.
hmm,
But when character is lost, all is lost. And therefore, the first thing you want to look at when you are appointing your directors is their reputation. Of course, it goes without saying that the law itself expects that a person who will be appointed a director will first not be a minor. That means that that person will be above the age of 18 years. He would also not be a bankrupt. He would also be of sound mind, and he would not have had any criminal charges for which he had been, sentenced.
hmm,
So those are the attributes towards the character of a director. The next
hmm,
thing you want to look at is the passion. And you will agree with me that different people have different passions for different things. I'm
hmm,
not too sure how well I will fit into the board of the Nigerian Board of Boxing Control, for instance. I don't know about you, you know. So you have to look at the person and interview the person and be sure that this person has a passion for this particular business that we're talking about. Because
hmm,
when you have passion, you give your time, you give your energy without even looking back. So
hmm,
the next thing that we have to look at is the expertise that a person has. Now, basically, we know that the human resource contributes 60% to the success of a business. So obviously, we need somebody who is, well versed in human resource matters.
hmm,
Finance, you know, asset is mainly, composed of capital and liability. So we need somebody who understands the how to go about acquiring the assets and the gearing ratio. How much of capital should come to how much of loans, so that the profitability can be meaningful.
hmm,
Otherwise, if you are heavily loaded with facilities and things, then there's no dividend likely to come to anybody by the time you pay your overheads. So you need experts. You also need these days, we're in the fourth revolution, so you need expertise in um, uh, IT. And with that, you need somebody who understands cyber security, cyber risk, and all the rest of it. You may
hmm,
not necessarily find all of it on the board. You may
hmm,
find line managers who are middle level, general manager, assistant general manager, but hoping to groom them to the level of the board. And
hmm,
finally, you need people who have time. And that's
hmm,
why Kama now says that it is ideal not to sit on more than 5 boards of PLCs, because these things are time consuming. So no
hmm,
matter how well meaning a man is, if he doesn't have the time to commit, to that activity, there really is no point giving him, you know, that job. So those are the basic attributes. And then we now look at a system where we're talking about diversity on the board. Diversity is good because it avoids group thinking.
hmm, hmm, hmm. Fantastic. Fantastic point. And Mrs. Fagbure, when you said when you make sure we said we needed a man, I said, yeah, we needed a man or a woman on the board. Now, SDG, the Sustainable Development Goal 5, very much on my thinking now. And that SDG 5 talk about gender equality. Do you think gender mainstreaming should be made a deliberate corporate policy in the recruitment of board members, especially for listed entities? Hmm. Hello. Okay. We might be having a bit of a glitch from Mrs. Fagbure's end. But our very first point that she's raising here, we have to have passion, a person, a man or a woman of passion, a man or a woman with knowledge, man or woman with integrity. And then, of course, naturally, a man or woman who is IT literate. We will get back soon to Mrs. Fagbure as soon as she can join us. And when we'll be looking at that, one of the things that, and of course, we talked about competence. Yes, competence is knowledge. You have to be very knowledgeable and competent in your dealing. Um, we might try and get Mrs. Fagbure back anytime from now. When she comes back, you know, we will be looking at the Sustainable Development Goal 5 on gender equity, and I was going to also look at gender mainstreaming, whether to make it a deliberate corporate policy on the recruitment of board members, especially for those listed companies. I also want to thank our online participants. Obi Choma, thank you very much. Glad to be here. We have Bidemi, Akinfelu, nice of you to join us, and so many. Lucky Dauda, all the way from Benin Kebi. Thank you too, Murtala. Um, yes, kindly check your microphone. So, okay, I'll just do that right away. Um, while we are looking at that, we might just take a short decision to go. Oh, Obi Hussein, happy to get to go on a short interlude while we get our guest to come back. Alexander Zomon, nice to have you. If we step back a little and try and see how we can connect Mrs. Fagbure back, we
Okay,
will. Oh, she's
I'm back.
there.
I'm back.
There you
I don't
are.
know
You
what
are.
happened. Eh,
No,
It looks like it was from your end because I didn't touch anything.
it's okay. IT does different things. I asked you that question on SDG Goal 5 on gender equality, and I wanted your thoughts. Whether you think gender mainstreaming should be made a deliberate corporate policy in the recruitment of board members, especially for listed entities.
Yes, I think I agree. In the sense that, like I said earlier, the family consists of, the various genders. You have the mother and the father, and you have the
Mhm.
children, boys and girls. So I think there is no balance in, the understanding and the cultural needs and requirements of a
Mm,
society if the people who are thinking for them are just from one gender. And that's
mm,
why, if you think the gender diversity issue has come back as far as the Beijing conference of 1995,
mm,
thereafter the OECD principles, and definitely I agree with the SDG thinking that if you
mm.
educate a woman, you educate a nation. If you
So true.
empower a woman, you empower a nation. And
So true.
therefore, I will agree totally that there is need to have, both genders on the
Super.
board.
Super point. Now, let me ask you, madam, as a female
Yes.
corporate executive, is there gender balancing on the board of most corporate entities in Nigeria? If yes, why is it so? And if no, why is it not so?
The answer is a big no. And I don't think it's a Nigerian question alone. I have checked surveys all over the world. And last year, Australia was said to have been the best performing country in terms of an attempt towards gender parity on the board. And they were still doing 40%. Most
Hmm,
of the Scandinavian countries too are doing well: Finland, Norway, and the rest of them. But they're still talking certainly not 50%, less than 50%. In Nigeria, the data is probably not totally available, but I think the average tends was about 33, one third percent. That's one third of the board. The banking
hmm,
industry ranges between 40%, and as low as 10%. So
Hmm.
there definitely is no gender equality on any
I
board, maybe not
see.
anywhere in the world.
I see. Yeah. Thank you for those insights. And I also know that various studies have shown that regardless of race, geography, demography, and yeah, even religion and bias, that there are more male-dominated boards than female-dominated boards globally. What's your take on this, and how can this narrative be changed?
I think if we want to discuss this, we must go back to the basics and look at the antecedents. The first disadvantage women had was educational. In the early days, people thought it wasn't quite cost effective to train women to the highest level because they thought, okay, at some point she's going to change her name. And then again, she's just going to sit in the kitchen and it all comes to waste. So
Hmm.
that has affected, the progress of women in the boardroom. And another thing is that apart from the educational issue, you have the work-life balance issue. As you know, the women are, the ones who take more care at the domestic level. But if procreation must continue, because humanity must continue, then it is imperative that families must be created. And
Hmm.
somebody has to be there to nurture the children. Otherwise, society will be worse off. So those are
I,
the two main issues that put women at a disadvantage. But I
hmm.
think the what do I call it now? The argument is changing in the
Oh.
sense that women are, I mean, in school now, and at least in many parts of the world, maybe less in developing countries, but in most parts of the world, you find that there is no discrimination towards admission of pupils based on their gender. But I
Hmm.
think what women also have to watch out for is that we're more in the HAS sector of education, which means we're more into the humanities, the arts, the social sciences, and things.
Hmm.
With the
Hmm.
fourth industrial revolution, women have to pay more attention to the STEM education, that is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, because this
Hmm.
is the world of artificial intelligence. So if you
Hmm.
even look at the statistics, you will find that in the STEM sector of the economy, you will find still less women than you
Hmm.
find in other sectors. So women
Hmm.
need to catch up. I was pleasantly surprised, let me add, that in the last 24 hours, I came across information that said that for the first time in ABU 60 years, that a woman got a first class in mathematics. And in Unilag right now, for the first time in 59 years, there's a girl who got the best result in civil engineering and overall best in the faculty of engineering. So I think
Hmm.
with, more emphasis on the STEM education, we would have a bigger share of the pie in the boardroom. Then
Wow.
I also know that when you talk about the other issues, domestic challenges, work-life balance, and all that,
Hmm.
the emerging scenario has helped us a bit in the sense that you have baby-friendly offices now at the bigger
Hmm.
level, and
Hmm.
therefore people can, put their minds at rest while they are out at work. That's number one. Number two, you also have more of remote working now. It has always been there, but it's there at a bigger issue. I know of a woman who took her child to the jam center and just found a little corner for herself and was writing the minutes of a board meeting. This was maybe 12, 13 years ago. But she knew that she couldn't do much else while there. So she used that time to cover her office work so that she would be able to do her housework when she got home. So women have
Okay.
always exercised that initiative to get the work done. Finally,
Fantastic.
I think the issue of what you call the boys' club is another thing that they use against women. And that means that they don't go to golf courses, they don't do the networking and things. I think that is changing fast because of the age of social media. You find that
Hmm.
there's a lot of networking that goes on social media. You can actually
Hmm.
have, a business relationship with somebody who lives in Austria, who you may
Hmm.
not see for 10 years.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
I think the gap will close with the emerging scenario that has made connectivity easier and has
Hmm.
also encouraged women to go into, the STEM fields.
Hmm.
So it will give us
Fantastic.
more opportunities in the boardroom.
Fantastic. I was a bit enthused with some of those statistics you mentioned about Ahmadu Bello University and University of Lagos and quite a number of our polytechnics. So let me say to you and our professional women, Upswan,
Yes,
and
Oxfam.
we now go a bit deeper into politics. We're talking about boardroom politics. We know, of course, it's both complex and dynamic, and only experienced leaders can survive the intrigue. I like to ask you generally, how is it like surviving as a leader, as a female leader in a male-dominated board? And I want you to look at it from two angles. One, how do female colleagues perceive their female leader in the boardroom? And secondly, is it true that many female leaders who successfully survive in a male-dominated board end up as autocratic leaders or dictators?
That is interesting. I think, first of all, the perception of female leaders one to the other in the boardroom is slightly individualistic. But on average, I think you want to look up to somebody who's your superior and is already in the boardroom, hoping that you will get there one day yourself, or
Mm-hmm.
at least be able to gain some mentorship from that person. So,
Mm,
from that angle, I've always, been happy to see women ahead of me and to try to gain inspiration from the way that they have managed their affairs. As for maybe women becoming autocratic because they are in a male dominated field, I don't really think so. I think
mm,
what you may say about women is that women are very painstaking, women are very focused, in the sense that when there's something to be done, they give it their all. And
mm,
therefore, when you're working with them, they don't cut you no slack. But that
mm,
does not mean that they're autocratic or that they're, dictators. They just
mm,
want the work done. And I can tell you one thing about a woman, that once you get the work done in the way that pleases her, that, you can get anything out of her. I
mm,
remember a colleague of mine once said she had a junior, in the office, a subordinate. And every Monday morning, he would come round and say, Madam, how was your weekend? I hope the family is fine, and this, that, and the other. And of course, I wasn't catching any eyes with her. So when his assessment came, and he didn't think he got the type of assessment, I'm even saying a man now, which so you can fix a woman there too. But I'm just saying the philosophy that surrounded that argument. And he went to her and said, Madam, how did you rate me like this? That I thought I would, get a better rating. And she said to him that you are not helping me to get this work done. All the
mm,
niceties that you are expressing, are not moving the work forward. So that's not what I really need. If you spent less time chatting with me and finding out how my domestic affairs were, and spent more time, you know, getting results, bringing deliveries, which means I have less work to do, then we'll be a happier team.
Wonderful. Very interesting point. And they're still talking about reality and perception. It's also said that most female leaders perform better. Absolutely, no doubt about that. Um, but then more female will still prefer a male dominated board to a female dominated board. Is that correct? What's your
I
perspective?
wouldn't
What's your
I wouldn't say there's a hard and fast rule about it. I can tell you here that I have a client, they're in the medical line, a specific specialty, and of a board of 9 people, there are 6 women
Hmm,
and just 3 men. I also know 1 or 2 NGOs. For instance, if you look at a big NGO like the Nigerian Girl Guides or Wimbys, you would, normally expect that in their boards there will be mostly women. What
right,
I find is that those boards will normally have 1 or 2 men, again for the gender balance that we're talking about. But
right.
it is not necessarily correct that in every industry, it depends on what the industry is set out to address, or the main objects of, even if it was an NGO. So
Hmm,
that's what determines whether they want to work with men more or they want to work with women more. But I
more.
don't think there's a hard and fast rule
Super.
about those things.
Super, fantastic. And I see our online participants, Mr. Olusoju, Shosonlu, asking, please, what can a non-executive director do differently to ensure an effective directorship in line with the best global practice?
A non-executive director, you must understand that all directors are rated. First, by the financial reports. You have the directors page that puts up the attendance list at meetings. You also have, the reports of various committees and, how they have performed. Then when you get further out, you have board evaluation reports that are either done by externals or in-house. There are peer reviews in those things. So you want to pay attention to your rating, your scores in some of those things. You also want to read wide and, research a lot, develop yourself. Because if you are bringing an argument into the boardroom that it would even enhance the progress of the business, there's no room for speculation. You must be able to defend it with facts and figures and, maybe antecedents or, precedents or whatever. So the important thing is that you need the team spirit. Nobody should go into the boardroom with a sense of aggressiveness. You will be open, but you will also, give everybody a chance. There's no point anybody just, listening to the sound of his or her own voice all day. Another thing that helps a non-executive director is to be moderate in both body language and appearance. The boardroom is a business premises. So how you dress is very important. They say dress as you want to be addressed, for instance. And then also, if you want others to listen to you, you must be prepared to listen to others too. And in, the various contributions, you will see that where the greatest good of the greatest number is put before everything else, there would be relative harmony and everybody will shine, whether executive, whether non-executive. Also, the non-executive has to understand the vision and the mission of the business to be able to key in. You have to understand the organogram, to be able to understand the reporting channels, to be able to understand where you have, made an incursion into management purview and what is actually the business of the non-executives on the board. So you don't cross each other and cross lines, but with a proper understanding of what should be. And definitely the quality of the minutes would reflect the contribution of everybody. You don't really want to agree with what everybody is saying. You are not going to score yourself high. But if you bring valid arguments into the board, of course, everybody looks forward to seeing you on the board. And the day you are not there, you will be missed. So that is, I think, those are some of the ways I think you should make your presence felt.
Fantastic. Mrs. Fagbure, so thank you so much. And then if you are just joining, I have been fielding questions and interrogations into the perceptions and the realities surrounding the survival as a female corporate leader in a male-dominated board. We'll go on a short break now. Please keep your questions coming. And when we come back, we'll wrap and ask more questions from our erudite guests. I like to say, Mrs. Fagbure, you are really practical knowledge on two legs. You are welcome. Back to our esteemed guest, Mrs. Fagbure. I want to step it down and maybe tap one or two things from your practical experience. Because we've had issues surrounding perceptions, realities, human playing field. Women can hold their own in a board well structured, where you have competence, you have integrity, of course, knowledge of IT, and the fact that the passion will always be there. More now that our ladies are not only showing A class, they're not showing super class in between um, their male counterparts academically. We are beginning to see the emergence of women. Work in progress, we say it is, but more and more are coming. Now, Mrs. Fagburi, I wanted to ask you if you can share with us any specific tough experience in a male dominated board that you like to share with our viewers and our listeners. Uh, One, how did you survive it? What lessons did you learn from it? And how should our female leaders, especially those who have a successful tenure on a dominated board, be celebrated? The survivor, lessons learned, and how should they be celebrated?
First of all, let me say that generally there are certain issues that often come up as thorny issues. One of them is when you have to remove a director. It can be a very stormy thing.
Mm,
Another thing is when you have to replace an auditor. It can actually generate, a lot of energy. Another thing is when you either want to invite new investors, especially where you are dealing with a private company, or when somebody is seeking to take over the shares of another person. It can
mm,
be quite emotive
mm,
because private companies are not quoted on the stock exchange, so there's a restriction to the transfer of shares from one person to the other, especially when a non-member is one of the parties involved. So the
mm,
particular case I'd like to talk about was a boardroom where the MD was a bit mischievous. He was a man. There were issues raised about loans and advances and some disbursements that the auditors did not feel were done in accordance with governance, the best global practice. And so a report came to the board, and the board decided that the auditors should be invited to the next meeting to come and enlighten them so that they could at least take appropriate steps to deal with the matter. Unfortunately, because the person who was supposed to invite them was also the person on the hot seat, he played mischief. And at the meeting where the auditors were supposed to come and speak to their report, they seemed to be running late. And the chairman then said, why don't you get these people and find out exactly where they are and how long we have to wait for them? And to everybody's shock, the managing director, he went out and came back and said he had called them and that because they're a very big firm, that they had said that they didn't quite think that they could fit in to that arrangement right now, that they had a lot of engagements and that they had nobody to spare that was going to come to the board. Of course,
mm,
as an accountant, I immediately read some mischief into it. But unfortunately, the board didn't quite see it. Their attitude was that what effrontery, what arrogance, everybody hit the roof. And they decided that they would have to remove the auditors at that meeting. So I then said to them that, with due respect, Kama does not allow you to do that. That you would have to convene an annual general meeting or an extraordinary general meeting to debate this matter with the shareholders. Because the law is that the directors can fill a casual vacancy. But beyond that, the re-election of reconfirmation of auditors would normally come up as an item at the annual general meeting, where there is no outgoing auditor. You would just take a resolution to authorize the directors to fix their remuneration along existing terms and things. So I said to them that it would not be in order if these auditors were to be removed at this table. And a few people looked at me and felt that I was trying to create a stumbling block. But fortunately, there were one or two lawyers on the board as well who said, Madam is right. She's sticking with due process and that there is nothing, to be lost by taking that route. Emotions were high and everything, but after some time, tempers cooled down. And then I said to the chairman, I said, in my experience, that I don't even think you would have to get to that annual general meeting where the issue of removing the auditors will be up for debate. Because by law, they must get adequate notice of that meeting, they must attend that meeting and be prepared to defend themselves. And you may get yourself into a bit of a mess. That I think the easier thing would be to speak to the managing partner of the audit firm. By code, we're normally advised to make sure that you don't have all your eggs in one basket. So auditors would expect to lose jobs now and again and to pick up new appointments. So it's not going to be something that they've never heard of, that will put their back up against the wall, that they always like to end on a note of friendship because they can always come back again after some years. And the chairman bought into it and thanked me, and that was how the matter was resolved eventually.
Wonderful.
So
Very
if you are,
interesting.
sorry.
Go ahead. Very interesting. Very interesting. Lessons to learn from there.
Yes, a lesson to learn from there is that one, you have to be very calm in making your points, especially where tempers are hot. Secondly, you have to have your facts. If I didn't know Kama enough to quote Kama, no sentiment would have dissuaded them if there was no law backing my position. So you have to know the law, that you are going to put on the table to be able to save a future problem. Thirdly, it's not enough to know the law. It's not enough, to be well-meaning. You have to have some grit. In the principle of debate, sometimes people are talking all at once. You must know when to be silent and you must know when to speak. If you check the alphabets that go with the word listen and the alphabet that go with the word silent, they're actually the same, but arranged differently. You cannot be listening and be talking. And if you are silent, you certainly will listen. So you must know how to manage the scenario, when to speak and when to be silent, and how to marshal your points.
Wonderful. Thank you for those snippets of wisdom. And I wanted to ask you, how should female leaders who've had successful tenure in a male-dominated board, how should they be celebrated in your view?
I think celebration at the board level, there are some collective ways of celebrating board members.
All right.
And one of the ways that board members are celebrated collectively in Nigeria, for instance, for PLCs, you have the premium boards that have been created by the NGX. You really have to be a board that has the highest governance standard. And in that situation, one thing I say is that the success or failure of a board is a collective thing. So everybody shares in the success and everybody shares in the failure. So you want to be proud of yourself to say, I'm serving on this board, while on the premium board list.
Okay.
There is also another list that is the UN Global Compact. It's for the companies that have the best global standards as far as governance is concerned. You want to be proud of yourself to say, my company is a UN Global Compact member. Then
Wonderful.
you are, so those things are opportunities that you can also tap to. And that is why there are certain boards that if you say you are on those boards, you must know what you are doing. You must be a hot cake, if you understand what I mean.
You must really know your onions. Just like how your Daramola is asking that do boards who have only family members run good businesses?
They can run good businesses. And I will give you examples. The Odutola Industries has come a very long way. The same thing, the Lishabi family, Lishabi Mills, they've been on since 1960 or something. Essentially, their board has comprised mainly of um,
Family
family
members.
members. Well,
Mm.
what you can do in that situation is, if you really want the best practice, you can actually have independent directors.
Mm.
Independent directors are not supposed to have any shares. And I
Mm.
know some of these boards have those independent directors. There are
Oh.
people of preeminence who have the time to spare. I mean, if you
Mm.
had our own Professor Wole Soyinka on your board, for instance, you know, he's going to give you that goodwill.
Mm.
And the reason he's going to give you that goodwill is because he's a very frank person. If
Mm.
he thought you could do it better, he would say so. He would
Mm.
definitely bring value added to that board. So, but he will not necessarily be interested in being a shareholder. So
Mm.
your family can still keep your shares, but there are people of preeminence who will contribute meaningfully to the progress of that business without having shares on that board.
Wow. Fantastic point. Fantastic insights you've shared there. Mr. Fagbure, I won't let you go without naturally asking this question to get your opinion on the potentially detrimental impact of career advancement on women's work-life balance. One and two. I mean, we know who your biggest inspirations are. Has it always been part of your plan to become a leader?
Mr. Fasuka, can we take one? Okay, let me try. Let me try and see if I can do all together.
Yes.
Uh, the first question was
Yes.
saying, what was it
Work
now?
life, women's work
Work
life
life,
balance. Your opinion
work life.
potentially be detrimental to their career on the work life balance question.
I don't think so. I think globally there are a lot of women who have done very well. If I come home, there is Mrs. Bola Adeshola, there is Oyeyinka Adeboye in Kadri, there is Mrs. Tifase. I can't remember her first name in Siemens. There is Zelo Aiboni in Shell. If they can do it, their family, I mean, they have families, they're all married, you know. I know that, for instance, even Mrs. Adeshola has a set of twin daughters. So I think it's being able to juggle, you know, the balls. And
Wow.
like I said, it's getting easier because
Hmm.
there are lots of companies globally that have baby friendly offices now. If we look abroad, we look at, I think it's Mrs. No something, who was the CEO of Pepsi. There
Yeah.
was a CEO of Google. There are many women who, you know, have made it work for themselves. And I think at this point, I would also make a plea to men that we are all part of a family. We all want to be part of a family. And
Hmm.
therefore, there are times when the wives, you know, the husbands can help their wives to succeed.
Hmm.
I would bring in two adages. The hand that rocks the cradle rules the world.
Oh
And
yeah.
that means that even our men were raised by mothers. So
Wow.
if we
Fantastic.
are happy to have been raised by mothers, then we should support mothers to continue to raise children. So I don't
Beautiful.
think men should, you know, flog us for trying to find the work-life balance. We
I
should
I,
also
I
remember,
agree.
we should also remember that they say that behind every successful man, there is a woman.
Hmm.
Some people want to change it and say beside. I say behind, because
Hmm.
the work and, you know, the drive that we put into running the home is sometimes not celebrated in public, but it's an unpaid service. You know, I read the story of a woman who went to an interview and they asked for her experience and she put something flowery, and they
Hmm.
asked her that they hadn't heard that job description before. She said, I wash dishes, I birth children, I do this, I do that. So we have unpaid jobs. I
Hmm.
remember, you know, in my early days, a lady said her boss said to her that you are coming late, you are coming late. And if you come 5 minutes past 8 tomorrow, there will be hell. Of course, she still came 5 minutes past 8. And she said when her boss was going to flare up, she said to him that, sir, what was your routine this morning? Somebody got your bath water ready. Somebody made sure breakfast was ready. Somebody waved you off to the car. Somebody has sorted out that the children. I am one of those somebodies. And her boss just burst into laughter. That's so, sir,
I
please
can
bear with me.
I
I'm
can
trying my very best.
I can imagine. Thank you very much for those insights. Please still hang on.
So your
We'll
next
do it.
question.
Yes. Oh, you already talked about it. I was asking about your biggest inspirations, and you mentioned them.
Oh
Those
no,
who have inspired you
I have
in
mentioned my
senior.
greatest inspiration. Oh. When you
Okay.
talk
Okay.
about
Go
my
ahead.
greatest inspiration, charity
Yes.
begins at home. I
Okay.
would take my parents, but different aspects. My
Okay.
mother, was able to help me to find that work-life balance, taught me how to manage, the home front while also being able to be out there. My
Yeah.
father, he took me into the boardroom very early and
Hmm.
gave me the tips as to how to remain there.
Hmm. Hmm.
I would also look up to Chief Ogmanjo, Chris Ogmanjo, any day. He was
Hmm.
one of the earliest chairmen I ever worked with. At
Hmm.
98, I am still working with him.
Wow.
Mrs.
Fantastic.
Olakuni of blessed memory,
Oh yes.
many free lunches, many pep talks brought me into the profession. And of course,
Super.
I pay absolute deference to all my bosses, starting from Mr. CEO Oyediran, uh, Chifale, all those people who were in the governance unit, and
Okay.
my longtime manager in audit, Mr. Shegun Oshuso, and Mr. Adewumi, who taught me how to be a company secretary.
Fantastic, fantastic. I can continue on and on. Unfortunately, time not being our friend. I wanted you to, on this subject, give us your last word. Can we have your last word?
Yes, my last word is to say that women should continue to aspire and should continue to find out what the next thinking is, what the next direction of business is, and key into it. Because we're talking of the fourth industrial revolution now. Who knows what next? The other day I was watching a program and we were told that there were cars that could now serve a dual purpose. They could move on land and they could fly. So you never know. What's his name has gone to space and is trying to commercialize it.
Bezos,
Richard
yeah.
Branson, Elon
Mm-hmm.
Musk is trying to do the same thing. So I think the important thing for women is to make sure that we're not left behind. Whatever
Super.
aspects of business is the new thinking, we should keep keying in so that our percentages will be at least equal. And there's nothing stopping us from even outnumbering the men on the boards.
Super. Fantastic. Thank you very much. I can't thank you much more better than the past president of ICAN, Mr. Razak Jariola, who has turned it out there that you've done fantastic in your output. I'd like to now thank you, madam, for coming on. Thank our online participants. We'll go on a very short, very brief, short break. And then when we come back, we'll wrap up and we'll be out of this program. Thank you. Oh, yes, thank you, online participants. We do this 2 times in a week. And so our next episode will be on Thursday, February the 3rd, 2022. Of course, the venue will be on ICANN social media, time 6 p.m. West African time. And the topic we are going to be looking at is technology trends, impact on global accountancy, where we'll be have guesting Mr. Lawrence Amadi, FCA, CIMA, ACMA, a partner with the advisory division of KPMG Lagos office. Mr. Amadi is an integral part of KPMG's Africa's Telecoms Group and has led several IT audit and advisory projects across Southern Africa, East and Central Africa, and West Africa countries. Let me leave you with this quotation. Companies that overlook half of the world's population overlook half of the world's talent. To compete effectively, we need to reflect the diversity of the world in which we and our clients live and work. End of quote. That is attributable to Sheila Penrose, the chair of the board of Jones Lang LaSalle. You be the change you always like to see, and it will come your way on Thursday, February the 3rd, 2022. I remain Akin Fatumke, your anchor. ICAN on air. Bye for now.